check it out right now. Tell us, what do you stand for? It's time for you to go on record. Behind Enemy Lines. Back on the air. Gene Baradelli, back behind Enemy Lines. Joining me on the line right now, it's a pleasure to welcome to the show a veteran, war correspondent, and author, Bob Dvorchak. I hope you pronounced the name. I pronounced the name right because, Baradelli is hard to pronounce, and I hate mispronouncing other people's names. How are you today?
Very good. It's great to be here, but at my age and what I've been through, it's great to be anywhere, Gene. And you got the last name right. Yes.
Oh, right. Look at that. Thank goodness, because, like I said, I hate doing that. So, listen, you've lived a very unique life, Bob, and a lot of it comes out in your most recent book, Drive On, The Uncensored War of Bedouin Bob and the All-Americans. It's a book that I'm definitely picking up because I have so many friends who are veterans and been in combat situations. But this is the first time I'm getting the pleasure of speaking to a war correspondent. How in the world did you get involved, not only in journalism, but in such an extreme area of journalism that you actually are putting yourself in danger?
Just naturally lucky, I guess. No. Journalism, it'll be 50 years in June when I got my first newspaper job, 10 days out of high school, and I worked my way through college doing that from a small town in Pennsylvania, Uniontown, the southwest corner, and I just kept going until I was a national writer for the Associated Press based in New York City, and one day the boss walked by and said, "Hey, I want you to go to Saudi Arabia to cover the war." And I said, "For what, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years?" And he said, "Whatever it takes." And I was on my way. Now, of course, when I got that assignment, I knew right away my job was to get as close to war as possible so I could write about it. Because in the insane world of journalism, stories are best when the situation is worst. And what could be worse than a war? And through deft maneuvering on my part, I got assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division and went to war with them. Now,
that in and of itself is an amazing accomplishment to just even obtain the permission to travel and basically embed yourself with the 82nd Airborne. What was their reaction to finding out that they were going to have you tagging along with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll be straight up front, I was more than embedded. When I showed up, the brigade commander, the colonel who was running the show, said, "I'll take you to war, and you live like we do and go where we go, but you got to join the unit." And he handed me the shoulder patches, the AA shoulder patches of the 82nd Airborne, and I said, "Okay, that's what I got to do. That's what I got to do." And it was and this happened several times, but the sergeant asked me. He said, "Did you volunteer to be here, or did somebody order you to?" And I said, "Well, I got the assignment, but, like you guys know, if you're in the 82nd, you got to volunteer. I want to be here because it's the biggest story in the world." They, "Okay, are you getting any extra pay?" I said, "No, but they did double the indemnity on my life insurance policy, so I got that working." "Okay, you're going to war, but you don't have a weapon." I said, "No, as a civilian, I can't carry a weapon, but I have this portable typewriter, this Combat Olivetti, and some notebooks. So I got and an ID card that identifies me as a civilian in the company of the U.S. military." And I said, "Okay,
unreal.
If we jump, are you going to jump with us?" I said, "Absolutely. I'm here to go where you go and do what you do." So he said, "Okay, let me get this straight. You don't have to be here. You're not getting any extra money. You're not carrying a weapon into a combat zone. And if we jump, you're going to jump too. Mister, you're crazier than us."
And you know what? From the outside looking in, it does sound quite crazy because, again, you're jumping out of airplanes and you haven't really had the training to do so, right?
No, but, hey, Walter Cronkite in World War II made a glider landing in Market Garden, and there were some AP photographers that made combat jumps in Korea. Now, unfortunately, I never had to test that theory, but I made the tailgate jump in Iraq, but I never had to jump out of an airplane.
Okay, so let's talk about that first experience, because now you're not only jumping out of an airplane, you're doing it in an area where there's extreme conflict. What were you told like right before?
What was that, Gene? What did you say?
Sure, I was trying to figure out what did you make a jump with them?
No, I didn't. I never did jump. No.
Okay.
Just jumped out of the back of a Humvee, the tailgate jump. That's all I did.
Okay.
There was some disappointment that they never did get a chance to jump. I mean, this was a unit that drew the original line in the sand and then invaded Iraq, and they were convinced they were going to just jump into Baghdad and take out that big-talking son of a gun who made them spend 7 months in the desert. Right.
Now, let's talk about that for a second. Obviously there have been movies made about our soldiers in the Middle East and the harsh conditions that they were in. Do any of the visuals that we've seen either in newsreels or in cinema do the conditions any justice?
Absolutely not. I mean, if you spent a day in that desert, nobody would ever call it a 100-hour war. It's like this desolation, this vast sea of sand, nothing that you're used to as anyone who lives in America, and the heat and the way it just saps your strength. You almost have to feel the grit in your teeth in the heat of the sun and the way your eyes squint under this harsh light. And then, at night in the wintertime, it got so cold it would freeze the water in your canteen. So it was an environment of extremes, and the only things that can live out there are scorpions and sandflies. But yet there was a whole American army out there.
And you included, right?
Yes. Yes.
So the whole American army and you. Was there ever a time that you... Go ahead.
Well, that's how I got the name Bedouin Bob. They said I adapted so well to the desert and living out there with them in a hole in the ground that there was a major in the Airborne who gave me the name Bedouin Bob because I just fit in so well with them. And that's what he said anyway.
That's great. Was there ever a time that you felt that your life was in immediate danger while you were with the 82nd Airborne?
Oh, maybe 5 or 6 times.
Is that all?
I laugh. I'll always remember. It was a Saturday, 26 years ago, when we invaded Iraq, and the main assault was going to start the next morning at 4 a.m., zero dark, stupid. And I dug a hole to sleep in, and I was trained by the Army to do this because I was an old draftee. It's 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, 18 inches deep. It gets you out of the wind, and you stack all the dirt on the north side, so if an artillery shell lands, it might absorb a piece of shrapnel. But if you take a direct hit, there's nothing anybody can do. However, all they have to do is shovel the dirt back on top of you because you dug your own grave. That was the night I accepted the fact that I was already dead, so that I didn't have to worry about it. I would just do my job and get on with it. It was sort of like an out-of-body experience, is the way I described it.
Yeah, you kind of have to put your mind in another place to I guess, rationalize it, right?
And then there was the time, and it was right after the ceasefire, and you figure everything's over with. Ended up in the desert in a minefield that every time you take a step and you put your foot down, you think you might trigger something that's going to, turn you into pink mist. So,
oh my God.
That was an eye opener too. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I can't even rationalize all this, and yet you're experiencing all this and having the added responsibility of trying to relay these experiences back to people who, like me, have no conception of this. How are you able to string 2 sentences together?
The challenge at the time was, we live in this Twitter age, this instant communication. I had a portable typewriter I was under operational security, so I would have to type up something on a sheet of paper and hand it to a censor who would put it in a pouch, and a Humvee would drive it to an airfield, and it would fly back to the rear for everybody else to use. And the average time, I found out later, was 3 days. Now, that was the average during the Civil War to get something back from a battlefield. So there was this tremendous disconnect, I think, between what was really happening at the point of attack and what they were showing, at the briefings and with the news clips. So I always felt like I was a voice in the desert, and you get lost out there, which is my prime motivation to write all this stuff down now in the book.
Absolutely. Now the book is available right now, right? Or is it available? Is still to be released? Is it out already?
It is out, yes, and you can get it Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, or anybody wants to shoot me an email at bdvorchak@msn.com. I'll get you an autographed copy out.
That's fantastic. And also check him out on Twitter at BedouinBob82. We're talking to Bob Dvorchak about his new book. And let me tell you something. My co-host Russ Gallo, who was actually in Operation Desert Storm and Desert Shield, is someone that is going to be very interested in reading Drive On, The Uncensored War of Bedouin Bob and the All-Americans. I just wish he could have been here for this interview. It would have been fantastic. We'll get his reactions after the interview. But, Bob, I do want to touch on one thing that's kind of an aside comment, and that is comparing, based on your decades of experience and where you've gone and what you've done, comparing the state of journalism when you were working for the AP and doing all these crazy things in the Middle East compared to the state of journalism these days. And one of the things I would like you to touch on is the difference in the trust level that people have now compared to what they had when you were out in the middle of the desert doing things that very few people can be able to do. How have things changed so much? Is it because of social media, or is it the quality of journalists have just gone down?
Well, that's a very good question, and I haven't been asked that before, but it's a combination of things. One, the profession that I knew of being assigned to go cover a story to its conclusion, then bringing it back, does not exist anymore. And that's a condition of journalism, newspapers shrinking, and the number of reporters or experienced reporters being out there. That doesn't happen anymore. Two, like you mentioned, social media with Twitter and the internet and instant communication. The written word does not have the same worth that it once had, and three, the level of trust. I think like many institutions in the United States, journalism, newspapers, people who write things down, just don't. It's just not there anymore. There's just been, I think, just so much distrust in everything that who do you turn to as a source and say, okay, I can trust this person. And the other thing too is what writer is out there with the troops, is seeing it from the foxhole level, is experiencing the same conditions that these people are on the ground. And I'm sure there must be somebody, but boy, I'll be darned if I know who they are. It's just it goes back to the tradition of Ernie Pyle, the World War II writer, who got down in the dirt and lived with the grunts and wrote about the face of war that wasn't being seen in the headquarters with the grand sweep of maps and things of that sort. You get a different perspective when you put yourself in their combat boots. I can tell you that.
Do you think that journalists are too worried about becoming famous themselves than they are about reporting the story?
Yeah. Well, anybody. See, my job in 50 years was to keep myself out of a story. I mean, I never inject myself in. I mean, as a writer, there are ways to do that without calling attention to yourself. But now it's, I don't think that's possible anymore. It's me, and look what I do, and I'm holding a mic, and I'm the scud stud, or whatever else. And to me, the basic saw of journalism was to get the story, but don't put yourself into it. And like I said, that the profession that I knew was gone. That's all. That's like Pony Express riders or John Henry with a steel driving man. That's all gone.
Yeah, listen, I don't want to end on a bad note. I just this book is going to be absolutely. I'm looking so forward to reading it. I really am. And the one thing I'm looking forward to seeing in it is I'm sure that by becoming embedded with this group of people, these extraordinary people, that I'm sure that you had to have developed more of a deeper connection,